is there anything in particular that is cloudy to you on the consumer notice that you want me to dive into, or should I just go through it?
Just go through it.
I
Great.
would love to hear your spiel when you meet with people, how you just how you describe it. I'm wondering if I say the wrong thing.
Me too.
Probably
I
not,
agree with Kristen
but
on that. Yeah.
let's do it here. Give me a second here. Let me find to share the right deal. Too many things popping up all over the place. Okay. Welcome, Joanne. How are you? Can you hear me, Joanne?
Yes, sir, I can. I just logged in here in the Frederick office.
Welcome to the discussion. So today we're going to be talking about the Pennsylvania Consumer Notice. There's some stuff that will translate to the Maryland agreement, and you're licensed in both states, so this is not a lost period of time for you.
Yes, sir.
I like this to be I want everyone to speak up. Doesn't work that way. I'll try and catch somebody sleeping. But I would really love it if everybody gives some feedback. So I wanted to talk about agency and how it relates, and a good way to explain agency is by digging into the consumer notice, not representation so much as contractually. What does agency look like? So, Kristen, you asked how do I deliver the consumer notice, and I say I delivered this the other day at a listing appointment, and I said, Stu, this is not a contract. This consumer notice, though, is important enough to the state of Pennsylvania and their legislature that they require that I present this to every consumer of real estate services that I have a discussion with. It's to discuss and explain to you the different roles that I can fill as a licensee in the state of Pennsylvania. In this case, Stu, I'd like to represent you as a seller's agent. With the signing of our listing contract, we're going to forge a fiduciary relationship. Do you know what fiduciary means? Does anybody know what fiduciary means?
Legally binding.
Legally
Relation.
binding? Actually, yeah. And one part, it is legally. It means that I'm your servant. I'm here
Right.
to assist you in making decisions that are in your best interest, even if they're counter to my best interest. That's my job. I'm here to represent your best interest at every turn. And when we sign that employment contract or that listing contract, that buyer agreement, I'm gonna have a fiduciary responsibility to you, and we're gonna go into those relationships or what those responsibilities are in a little bit. What was the acronym that they told you in pre-licensing for what your fiduciary responsibilities are?
I believe it's old car.
Old car, cold DC, but old car works absolutely. I like old car. That's better than the cold DC that I was taught. Old car, good. And we'll touch on old car here in a second. So Stu, I'm going to represent you as your seller's agent. I'm here to represent your best interest at every turn. A buyer's agent is going to be doing the same thing for the people that they bring in to show your property to. Now, dual agency, you can see how that would be difficult to represent the best interest of both parties at the same time. It kind of seems like a conflict, don't you agree? Yeah, I do. Okay. That's why I don't take dual agency lightly. Now, for me, if somebody calls on your sign, Stu, and says, I want to see that house, I absolutely work for you because everybody deserves a coach in their corner. and you hired me to be your coach. If there's somebody that I have a pre-existing relationship with, though, that I've shown properties and I have a buyer agency with, that might be a different situation. And we're going to discuss that at that time. If you're comfortable with it, we'll move it forward and I'm going to represent both parties, but it changes the standard a little bit. And my standard is to do no harm. I can't work against either of you. And if you're uncomfortable with that in any way, then we're going to designate another agent to represent another side of it. In fact, and Stu says, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, then we'll just take it right off the table right now, Stu. And we're going to make sure that anybody who writes an offer on this property, it's not me. Now, since I'm the broker, it's a little bit different because any agent that writes an offer on this property who's in one of my offices, I'm automatically a dual agent. That doesn't mean that I have a personal relationship with that client, but I do have a responsibility to protect that client. Now, designated agency. Designated agency. Can anybody explain to me how designated agency works? Just 30,000 foot view, doesn't have to be too nitty gritty. Just tell me what's designated agency.
Broker designates an agent.
Okay. Is that a one-off situation or is that an every time policy?
One off.
Depends.
Depends. Actually, our office policy.
Well, some brokerages have,
Yeah, go on with that thought. Continue.
that's okay. Yeah, because some brokerages, now, not Iron Valley, I don't think, but some brokerages have, everybody's a designated agent in that building. But I
More to
believe
the-
with our office,
More to the point, some offices don't practice designated agency. And if your broker doesn't practice designated agency, who works for your signed seller? If Kyle signs a listing agreement,
everybody,
right? And who works for that buyer? If April
Everybody.
has if April has a signed buyer agency, everybody works for that buyer. Everybody works for Kyle's seller. So if we don't practice designated agency in our house, if April brings a buyer to Kyle's listing, Kyle's a dual agent and April's a dual agent. Even though Kyle's never met April's dude and April's never met Kyle's lady, you both work for both people. And that gets a little sloppy, don't you think?
I would
That's
think.
why we practice designated agency. Kyle works for his lady to the exclusion of all others. April works for her guy to the exclusion of all others. They are both designated agents. The only dual agent in that situation is the broker, who is a level separated from that. And that everybody has a coach in their corner that they
Mhm.
know is rooting for them and fighting for their interest. Okay. Another watered down type of representation is transaction license. So that's not something I really try to get into. That's a very unique situation. A deal comes to me pre-formed. Let's say your cousin wants to buy the property. You hash this out over the Thanksgiving table. And you just want me to put this on paper and make sure that I build a roadmap to the transaction for you that you both can follow. I'm not assisting in anything like a home inspection, providing resources or coordinating or facilitating in any way. I'm just here to make sure that the paper's signed where it's supposed to be. And if I'm doing a transaction licensee deal, I prefer all parties to be in the room at the same time whenever I'm talking with anybody so that everybody knows what's going on. I'm basically a clerk. That's how I look at transaction licensee.
Oh,
So a transaction licensee provides real estate services without having any agency relationship with a consumer. Although a transaction licensee has no duty of loyalty or confidentiality, a transaction licensee is prohibiting from disclosing the following: that a seller will accept a price less than the asking price, that the buyer will pay a price greater than the price submitted in writing an offer, or that the seller or buyer will agree to financing terms other than those offered. Why is that? Because you're putting words in people's mouths that you don't have the authority to speak for. Like licensees and agency relationships, transaction licensees must disclose known material defects about the property. So there is still a burden here of disclosure and an element of liability. Everybody kind of looks at this transaction licensee thing as no big deal, but there is still burdens there. Okay. And then whenever I'm given the spiel, here is where I get into, old car or cold DC, et cetera. So comply with the real estate disclosure law. That's disclosure. Also disclosure, disclose as soon as practical all conflicts of interest. That's also disclosure. Disclosure, financial interest in a service. Can somebody go through and name, or can we do it as a team? What is old car?
been too many years for me. I don't remember.
Can you give me one?
I think it's obedient.
Yeah, I'll get you started with obedience.
Loyalty,
Loyalty.
Okay.
disclosure,
Disclosure.
confidentiality,
Confidentiality. A is the tough one.
Affordability? No.
Accounting.
Yeah, accounting.
accountability,
Accountability. Okay.
And then
Car.
R,
Reasonable.
Responsibility?
have to be reasonably good at your damn job. That's what that one
Okay.
is.
No,
Okay.
I guess I'm out. I'm not giving him this anymore.
Oh, come on, man. Hang in there. Hang in there. You know what you're doing. No, it's reasonable.
Reasonable care.
reasonable,
Reasonable care.
reasonable care. So that means you're reasonably good at what you're doing there. So let's break these down a little bit.
Okay.
What's obedience? I tell my people, obedience doesn't mean I wash your windows.
you do what they want you to do.
Right. Such as,
They
In
don't
relation
with
to
your
the
list price,
contract?
you list what they want.
that's right. Right. Now, and I explained to them, obedience doesn't mean I wash your windows, but obedience doesn't mean that, that I do whatever you tell me. It means I'll do whatever is legally permissible, but I am going to give you my opinion. I am going to try to give you the benefit of my experience. And if you're trying to list a property well over what it's worth, I'm going to try to explain to you the negative impacts of that. Ultimately, it's your house and I work for you. I realize that. That's where a lot of agents screw up and get the script flipped and think that the client is there for their benefit. we are there for the benefit of the client.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know how many times I thought I knew better. And a client told me, no, we're going to list higher. What happened? Well, we had multiple showings and it sold the next day, well above the price that I advised. So there's that. That happens. Obedience. What else might come into obedience? They tell you to submit the offer, you submit the offer. They tell you to rescind the offer, you rescind the offer. What are some of the pitfalls of that obedience, though? Does the client know better? No, you know better. You know the practice. You are the professional. It's your job to tell them what the outcomes may be if they continue with that course of action.
Fair housing would be one.
Has to be legal. Yeah, exactly.
Great. Yes. I was going to ask, what are some of the implications that a client might not be aware of? Fair housing's one.
Fair housing's a big one.
Yeah. Like I had this scenario, property listed in a very nice, well-established, mature neighborhood. Dave and Elaine put the property on the market. You know, this was a different market than we've been accustomed to lately. It was on the market several weeks. And a property or a showing happened, and then we had an offer on it. And the buyer was Northwest Human Service. Anybody know what Northwest Human Services is?
No.
Group home. Okay. And it's not necessarily a group home. It's not like a halfway house. It is, however, Northwest Human Services buys the property, they put in a caretaker, and then they lease it out to a client who may have physical or developmental limitations, but it allows them to live a relatively independent life out of a clinical setting where they can have as much of a normal life as could be expected in their particular situation. Okay. And David said, I'm not selling to them.
What was
How's
that
fair
about?
housing? That's a fair housing violation,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
We're discriminating on the basis of a disability. So sometimes the right decision isn't always absolutely in your face. I had to think about it for a minute before I said, David, that's not right. Now, the way I approached that with him was not, by law, you have to entertain that offer, right? No, I took that a little bit differently with him. I said, Dave, imagine if that was your mother, your sister, your brother, your kid, who was in a car wreck, had a limitation, was unable to be taken care of at home because they didn't have any family, or family wasn't able to take care of them. This is their only way that they're going to be able to live a reasonably normal life. He came around to it, and we were able to sell it. So his initial instinct was, I'm not entertaining that offer. It's our job, even while being obedient, to advise him to express that reasonable care and explain to him what the right decision was there to keep him out of trouble. Now, what would my option have been, gang, if he said, I don't care? What do we do in that situation?
Call your broker.
Walk away.
Yeah,
Walk away.
yeah, hot potato,
Yeah.
that's what we do with it.
The broker.
But that's the exact right answer. Call me, let me be the bad guy in that situation. I don't want you to damage your relationship. I don't want you to go along to get along here, because you feel the pressure. Anytime you ever feel an upset stomach about this stuff, that's the man in your belly telling you to do the right thing. I want you to raise your hand and ask for help. Okay?
Justin, can we know what your answer is? Because you're not going to force them to take a deal. You can't.
No, but in that situation, we might have to walk away from a situation.
Mm. Yep.
I would, I would rather have you have, let me be the bad guy there. But if we
I
can't
feel like
convince
I'm
them to
better
do-
at it, but I'll let you do it.
I would rather you not fracture your relationship. I would rather me be the one out there doing it, rather than have it come back on you. I mean, I had a client, I had a listing and the buyer called and said, what kind of people live in this neighborhood? You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I can't continue this conversation with you.
Right.
And, that's a very easy one to do. But, yeah, we just try to convince them by making it as human as possible. And if these people are inhuman, they're inhuman. Don't want to work with them. Loyalty. There's a train out there. You hear it?
No.
All right. What's loyalty look like in this scenario?
You're going to be around for your client and not disappear.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think loyalty is kind of a overarching umbrella term here. You're gonna do what you say you're gonna do. You're gonna protect them, and you're not gonna try and backdoor them. You're not gonna be you're going to assist them to make the decisions that are in their best interest, not the decisions that are in your best interest. For example, at a property, I represented the buyers, and we had on our reply to inspection a $25,000 reduction in price was our starting point for the negotiation. And we actually worked it down. Some repairs were made, but there was a $17,000 credit to the buyers on that agreement of sale. So a $17,000 closing cost credit. The way I had written it was for a $17,000, actually it was a $25,000 price reduction. Rather than $400,000, I had proposed that it be a $375,000 sale price because my people were bringing a high proportion of cash. It made no difference to them whether it was a credit or a price reduction. And the buyer's agent said, why don't we do it as a credit? That way our commission isn't affected.
That guy's a loser.
Right? I mean, I'm not mad about it, but she could have done better for her client in that situation, or at least she could have presented her client with that option. How's that grab you?
Sounds kind of unethical.
Kinda. I mean, I think that she could have done better for her client in that situation. That's our job, to represent the client to the best of our ability. Disclosure. The way I pitch this is, if there's anything I know about this property or any parties to this transaction, it's my job to disclose that to you, especially if it's going to give you a competitive edge when it comes to negotiation. Does anybody have any kind of examples of disclosure issues?
Like issues with the disclosure or just issues we've had?
Just
regarding
any
disclosure?
any kind of disclosure, not necessarily the seller's property disclosure, but something that you felt it was important to disclose to your client.
When I'm in a property, if I see anything wrong, I point it out. Like deteriorated wood, cracks around the
Mhm.
windows, things like that.
And why do you do that, Jess?
Further information.
Yeah,
I say because it's my job.
it is your job, right? Clients know what they like about properties. It's our
Mhm.
job to point out the things that they might not like down the road. It has a couple purposes. One, it protects them. Two, it protects you. Three, it builds trust with them. They get to finally feel that you're not there to make a sale, but you're there as their advocate to represent them in the transaction. And I think that's very important.
Mhm.
But disclosure can go much broader than that. If we know something about a party that we can present in a in an objective way, like this guy you have to be careful with because he is an investor. I've seen how this goes. If there's something you know about that, go ahead and pass it on. The thing that I'm thinking about here, I'm sitting in the Williamsport office right now. Here in the West Branch Association, earlier this year, it came to light that this lady was doing what I call joyriding. She was going out, she wrote an offer on a property with no intention of closing on the transaction. That's the
That's
sixth
crazy.
time she's done it. That's the sixth time she's done it in this association area,
My God.
right? If that's
Is
something
she
that you know
mentally
about,
ill?
I'm not a doctor, but
I understand.
you know, she's got some kind of hole inside that she's trying to fill by this role play thing that she's doing. You need to disclose kind of, that kind of stuff. What other kind of disclosure? Be careful. You're showing a beautiful property. You look out the back deck and it's a beautiful view of a farm field. And the client says, "Oh, that's gorgeous. I'm going to buy this house. It's got $1 million view." But you know that there's a shopping mall going to be breaking ground there in 3 weeks or 3 months, or it's, or whatever. You need to disclose that kind of stuff. Confidentiality.
Yeah.
Anybody have an example of confidentiality, how it's been protected or betrayed in a transaction?
Someone's motive to sell, desperation, financial disclosures and the like.
Yeah, property's been on the market for a minute. You show it, you get a call from the listing agent. Bring me an offer. These clients are brutal. They're going through a divorce. Just get me something on paper. Was that a violation? Quite possibly,
Unless they said it was okay to say all that.
unless they did. What about,
Justin, I think this happens a lot more between realtors who know each other, specifically like in the same office, things like that. I think it happens way more than it should.
that crosstalk is absolutely, it's so prevalent. Yeah, absolutely. It's listed high. It's not my price. Right? Um, and this is an absolute tactic that I leverage to my clients' benefit all the time. If I'm representing a buyer, I'm going to get that talkative seller agent on the phone and I'm going to let them run their mouth and I'm going to figure out what I can.
I love
I
it.
know my partner Christy does it on the regular. She's going to call and chat up that agent and find out what she can. Not saying you're going to get anything that's absolutely actionable, but you get a feel for everything. So you have to be careful that you're not that talkative agent. You're not that agent who says, "I think they'd take less," because you've got a good rapport with Danielle. You've done a half dozen deals together over the years and you feel real good about it. Or you came up through the ranks together and there's a level of trust there. You just got to be careful because people sue for the strangest things. And I don't want you to be a case study or the subject of a training someday. Like I was laying on my couch on New Year's Day and my client called me up. She's no longer with us, but I was like, hey, what's going on, girl? Happy New Year. She says, you're never going to believe it. I just hit a scratch off for $300,000. Let's go buy a house. I said, all right, let's go buy a house. And that was at a time when $300,000 would still buy a whole house. And, you know, it would have been very easy to be excited in that moment and share that with the listing agent. Like, you'll never believe it because it was such a cool story, right? But would that have kind of shown, you know, you're sharing personal information that's nobody's business except for your clients. So you need to be careful, you know, what you get excited about and how you share that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyle. What's accounting or accountability about?
I don't usually use that one.
You are responsible for what you do,
Yeah.
good or bad.
Good or bad, money, checks, offer presentation.
Wouldn't that be not showing homes to someone when they're not pre-approved for that price as
I'm
well?
going to lump that under reasonable care.
Okay.
And just good practice. And we'll talk about that one. Let me make a note here. But if you get a earnest money deposit, it's your job to handle that. That's not your money. You are a conduit. You need to deliver that. You would be shocked at how many earnest money deposits are misplaced. I didn't know it until I was a broker. You know, how often this happens. So be careful with that. Take that seriously. If you get an earnest money deposit from me, it's probably got holes in it where I stapled it inside a file. If I get a check, as soon as I get it, I staple it to the file because I don't want to lose it. So do that. What about reasonable care? We have to take reasonable care to protect our clients. That means, and you've heard me say this before, most likely, stay in your lane or get the competence that you need to veer out of your lane. If this is your first raw land deal, you got somebody who wants to buy a property and it sounds very simple. Hey, can you help me buy an acre so I can plop a trailer on it? Yeah, absolutely. How easy does that sound? It's just a trailer. Yeah, wrong, because maybe you don't have a highway occupancy permit. Maybe you don't have a septic permit. Maybe there's no well. Maybe the electric service isn't there. Maybe the zoning's wrong. Maybe there's not enough area on that lot to get all those things on that lot. And you wrote a contract without contingency because that's what your client said. I'll take it. You did not express the reasonable care in that situation that you should have. You didn't know all of the things down the line that you should have. Reasonable care means starting at this point and getting to the end point of the transaction. What are all the steps that I need to take to get there and not get yourself or the brokerage sued, not get your client into a situation where they have $100,000 investment that they can't work with. That's part of what reasonable care is. So if you don't have the expertise to deliver on that, again, listen to the man in your belly. Know what questions to ask. Raise your hand. buddy up with somebody who has done this in the past and can steer you around the potholes. Okay. That's what reasonable care means to me. You have to be reasonably good at your job with whatever they're asking. If somebody's asking you to help them, hey, are you licensed in Pennsylvania? Yes, I am. Does that mean you can help me buy a house in Center City, Philadelphia? Absolutely not. I don't know anything about the Center City, Philadelphia market, and I would probably be screwing you over if I helped you do that. So, have that humility, have that healthy fear. If you go outside of your area of expertise, you could be putting your client in harm. Now, do you have a buddy who also sells real estate in Center City, Philadelphia, who might be able to ride shotgun on this deal with you? Talk to me. Let's see if we can work something out so that you can help this client together. Or is it really not worth your time to drive 2.5 hours, to waste your time? So that's cold DC. That is the front. That is the consumer notice. Kristen, did I satisfy how you wanted to hear that presented? Or did I chop it up too much with my side quests?
No, that was wonderful. It is way more in depth than what I go into, and I truly thought that we did not do designated agencies, so egg on my face. I'm gonna have to change what I say.
Did I explain designated agency and non-designated agency in a way that's easier for you to understand now?
Yes, and it always did make sense to me. Like I always thought that designated agency was that you specifically were working for your client and not the umbrella of everyone within the company. And I think part of it too is going through CE courses, which kind of tend to get me confused sometimes too, especially on the first page of the agreement of sale, where you have your little check boxes and it's always explained, especially if you have another agent with Iron Valley, your same brokerage. Now I know exactly which one to check because you guys are doing designated agency. But then when I'm explaining dual agency, I don't do dual agency, but technically our brokerage does. So when you're explaining the consumer notice, you're saying that you don't, but the brokerage has to be dual agent if the other person is in your office. How do you go about that?
I say that the broker, if both agents are within the brokerage, technically the broker is a dual agent, meaning that he has a fiduciary responsibility to protect both clients.
Okay. So you're never checking off the box that says like no dual agency. I mean, you can't.
If it's in-house, right? If I'm the broker if you're dealing with 2 York agents or an agent from York and Carlisle, I am a dual agent. Even though I've never met your client, I've never had a client conversation with your lender. I don't know any of the particulars there. It is only dual agency in as much as you are both under our brokerage.
Okay.
I wish they would come up with a separate term, honestly.
I know, because it is muddied.
It is. But it goes back to the original way that it was designed, or how this business was run 100 years ago, where there was no buyer agency, right?
Right.
It
Yeah.
was, I was the broker, everybody was my client, and buyers weren't represented. And and then a buyer came along and said, "Hey, I would like you to represent me in this transaction." Great. And then designated agency came out of that down the road, where people wanted to be separated.
Yeah.
I would explain that while the broker is technically, is listed as a dual agent, is one level removed from this transaction, and will assist in mediating any difficulties, and has a responsibility to both clients.
Okay.
Now, let's go a step further on this. Let's say you have a listing, Kristen, and somebody calls on that listing. I want to buy it. You never met them. You say you don't practice dual agency. Would you write the offer for that buyer?
No.
Okay. And that is absolutely 100% respectable and fair. How do you handle that situation?
I have enough close colleagues that we do that for each other.
And
Throw each other a
I
bone, referral.
I think that is a great way to do it. It makes your life better, easier. You don't have to worry about anything. And I know that this causes a lot of people angst. Now, if somebody calls me up on one of my listings and says, I want to buy it, I do have the option of preparing that contract for them as an unrepresented buyer. Okay. Where out of service to my seller, I will prepare that contract and that buyer is on their own. I found out I was looking at this a little bit incorrectly several months ago. I would have advised you that you could charge that buyer a fee as a transaction licensee for the buyer side. That's incorrect.
Oh.
Erase that from your mind. In Pennsylvania, the Licensing and Registration Act infers, and it's not clearly stated, but it's inferred according to PAR and the legal hotline, that I should not be representing a client on one side as an agent and a client on the other side as a transaction licensee. I don't know the reasoning on that. I think it's stupid, but that's just me. I don't make the rules. Did anybody do that survey regarding the RELRA renovations that they have planned? That was one of the comments I made, is that I thought I should be able to do a transaction licensee for one party and have representation on the other if all parties agreed. But
So a question on that transaction licensee, are you covered by your E&O insurance if you don't take any money? Or do you have to take money? At least some sort of small fee in order to be covered if you're doing a transaction licensee.
see, that's why I love interaction on this shit. You just cook up all kinds of stuff that I never even considered. Okay, so E&O coverage on you just sent me on a great wild goose chase. Our E&O policy is 38 pages. So I'm going to have to go sifting through that a little bit to find out what kind of protection. And it may be a call to our rep. Thank you for that. I'll have to get back to you on that. You're such a forms geek. I love it. So good for you. Any other questions on agency and how we do it on that consumer notice?
Can I
Let me
ask you, wait, Justin, I'm sorry. Can I
No,
ask
go
you to
ahead.
repeat what you said at the very beginning when you're explaining this to your client for the first time? Because the first thing you say is, this is not a contract. This is discussing and explaining to you, my client, the different roles that I can offer. And then what else did you say? Because I feel like if you go into a lot of detail about this, I don't know, they might ask a whole bunch of questions.
Yep, let me run through it real quick, verbatim, the way I do it. This is not a contract, but it's important enough to the state of Pennsylvania that they require this consumer notice to explain the different roles that I can fill as a licensee in the state of Pennsylvania. I want to represent you as your seller's agent, which means that when we sign the listing contract or my employment contract, we're going to forge a fiduciary relationship, which means I'm technically your servant. I have to represent your best interest at every turn, even when the course of action I'm advising for you is in your best interest, even if it may be, against my best interest. The buyer's agent is going to be doing the same thing for your client. That's why you can see that it may be difficult for me to represent both parties equally as a dual agent. In many cases, we'll designate an agent to represent one party or another to make sure that all parties have a coach in their corner, because everybody deserves that in a real estate transaction. Now, if a deal comes to me free form and you just want me to be a clerk and put together a contract, we can act as a transaction licensee, but that's not my standard of practice. I'm more accustomed to presenting representation. I go down and I further break into, I owe you obedience. That doesn't mean that I do windows. However, if you tell me to do something, it's my responsibility to do it. It's also my responsibility to tell you some of the outcomes that might come from that course of action. I have to be loyal to you. I have to disclose to you anything that I know about a property, a person, or a situation that might give you an edge in negotiation. I have to protect your interest with confidentiality. It's nobody's business if you hit a scratch off for $1 million and money's no object to you. That's between you and me. I have to account for funds and paperwork, and I also have to exercise reasonable care in the execution of my duties to make sure that I don't put you at risk.
Thank you.
There's some other small stuff that you can touch on in there, but I don't think that's necessary in every case, because you're going to hit on it in the agreement of sale, such as the zoning designation has to be in there. As far as I'm concerned, that's lumped in with reasonable care. Now, I want you to check out the agreement of sale guidelines, page 6. If you've been hanging around here at all, you know I love the guidelines for preparation and use. Go to parealtors.org, or if you're in Maryland, they have an equally robust resource for you at MAR. They give you great stuff. And I think MAR actually has some videos that'll walk you through some of their forms. Here on page 6, it starts to talk about the business relationship blocks, how you're supposed to fill them out. So if you have a situation where you are not, where you say you have the listing and you are preparing a contract for an unrepresented buyer, an investor who shows up out of the woodwork and says, I'll take it. Do you have an agent? No, I don't have an agent. Well, I'm not representing you because I don't know you. I'm going to fill out that contract with no representation. You're going to check that no business relationship block, and you're not going to put any information in there at all. Go through starting on page 6, and it'll tell you how to fill out stuff. It's going to tell you examples. It's going to give you practice tips. And then it has this handy dandy flow chart to tell you about how representation works on the buyer side, on the seller side, and then the difference between dual and designated agency. So if you forget, which you will, we all do, we can go back there and check out this conveniently color-coded flow chart to talk about how this all works. So is this an in-house transaction? Yes, no. So you can see, you can be a designated agent whether or not it's an in-house transaction. Has anybody ever had an agent on the other side try to correct them tell them whether or not they're a designated agent. It's happened to me. That's an in-house decision. It has nothing to do whether it's an in-house transaction. So, are you a designated agent? Yes, you are. Then you are a buyer agent with designated agency. So that's a good resource for you. If you haven't read the entire standard agreement for the sale of real estate guidelines for preparation and use, oh man, I strongly urge it. Read it once a year just to go through it and check it out if there's any fun updates. And this is super new. It just came out 2 months ago.
How many pages is it?
Like a million.
Oh, okay.
Give me a second here, I'll tell you.
I was just curious. I've never read it, or if I have, it's been a long time.
67 pages of fun for a 14-page agreement.
Oh my. Good midnight reading.
It is. It is. It'll help you get to sleep. All right. That's pretty much what I have in store for you today. I know it's a recap, but I thought it would be useful. And I think one or two of you might have picked something up. Do you have any other questions? We have some time here if you want that we can touch on anything light. You tell me what you want, guys.
Can I just go over one thing?
Of course.
So I have a listing, let's say in York Springs. I have an open house and somebody comes in and wants to buy the house. I'm representing the seller. I want to represent the seller because I know the seller. But legally if I do write the offer, obviously I still have to be fair and honest because that's ethics.
That's how I explain it, yes.
Okay. I can't run comps for the house. They have to do that on their own, correct?
Here's how I do that. So here's my conversation. If somebody walks into my open house, says, I want to buy it today, I don't advise this for everybody. In fact, I don't advise it for anybody who's uncomfortable with it. But if
Right.
you're at a point where you're comfortable with this and you want to do it, I will allow it. If you have questions with how to execute it, please let me know. But somebody walks into your open house and says, I love it. It's just what I've been looking for. Do you have an agent? No, I don't have an agent. Will you represent us? The way this works, and you're going through the consumer notice with them, as you can see, I have a pre-existing relationship with the seller. For me personally, it would be an insult to offer you the same type of representation that I'm offering my seller, because our relationship is based off a long history and earned trust. You I've just met. Obviously, I have a pre-existing relationship with them. Now, I can write the contract for you, but as you know, I'm working for the seller in this case. It doesn't change my obligation to deal honestly with you and in good faith, and I'm happy to give you the information you need to make an educated decision. Here's the comps that I use to set the price. I'm probably not going to interpret it for them, but the way I do comps, hopefully they can lead themselves to that story. You do have to do a consumer notice for them. You do have to do a cost sheet for them with what information they give you. And I recommend doing a NRA. Have you ever seen an NRA?
What does that stand for?
Non-representation advisement. I'm going to show one to you here in about 30 seconds.
Right.
And then if they're comfortable with all that stuff, you can prepare that agreement for an unrepresented buyer on behalf of your seller.
Right, because since you're representing your seller, you obviously don't want the buyer to walk away, you know.
And you have to make sure all parties are comfortable with that. So here is a non-representation acknowledgement. Non-representation acknowledgement. Broker, Iron Valley, Licensee, Joanne. Buyer has read and received the consumer notice as adopted by the State Real Estate Commission. Does the buyer have a business relationship with another broker? Nope. Buyer is not represented by a broker. Broker listed above is a seller agent, as described in the consumer notice, who works exclusively for the seller and must act in the seller's best interest. Side note, if you're showing a property to anybody who's unrepresented and they tell you something, you have an obligation to disclose that to your seller because it could be an advantage to your seller. That is part of your fiduciary responsibility. You can use this in multiple situations. You can use this NRA whether you're writing that offer or not. If you want to cover your back by showing a property that you have listed to somebody who calls you for a showing, and you just want to clarify that they don't have a relationship with another broker, you can use this for them. This doesn't mean that they're writing a contract. It just means that you, the person who filled out this form, verified with them, the person who signed the form, that they have no relationship with another broker.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have anything to discuss? I really appreciate you guys taking the time to show up and listen to me prattle on about boring forms and kicking in some commentary to make me feel good about it. So if you have any other questions, hit me up. Thank you so much. And what should we talk about next month?
Foreclosures, auctions. I have no idea what any of those are.
I refuse. No.
Dang,
All right, I
so does
will.
everyone
Okay.
else.
Okay. So foreclosures,
Mm-hmm.
auctions, REOs, short sales,
Oh, Lord.
and other crap you should avoid.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very
Exactly.
good. Thank you for a
Thank
horrible
you.
topic, Jess. We will talk about
You're very
that
welcome.
next
you.
month.
I'll see you next month.
All right, great.
Bye.
All right, very good. Appreciate you guys. See you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.